He calls himself kind of a bad guy, someone who lives for the thrill of a fight and the chaos that follows. But as a child, he was nothing like that. He was scared, uncertain, and hesitant. Yet deep down, he dreamed of becoming an adventurer like the heroes his father used to tell him about while they fished together. His name is Ajax, a name his father gave him after a hero from one of those tales. And although he's a man of many names, it was this one name that unknowingly tied him to a destiny no one would ever wish upon their worst enemies. Ajax grew up in Moripusok, a small seaside village in Snezhnaya. Life there was cold and quiet. Every morning, he and his father would carve holes into frozen lakes to go ice fishing. It was slow, patient work, the kind that could take hours. But to Ajax, it was his favorite hobby. As they waited for a fish to bite, his father would fill the silence with stories, tales of adventure, courage, and faraway lands. And as his father spoke, Ajax would imagine himself as the hero, a boy standing against monsters, exploring places untouched by man, sailing a ship into a whale's belly, and fighting a dragon for 7 days. These stories became his world. They made him dream bigger than his small frozen village could hold. So here we have a child, innocent, curious, full of wonder, and completely unaware of what fate has in store for him. He has no idea that the path he's dreaming of will lead him somewhere no child should ever go, and that the stories he loves so much would one day become his reality, but twisted into something far more terrifying. So how did this child, this wide-eyed boy from a frozen fishing village, become one of the most dangerous men in all of Teyvat? Unlike what most people might think, Ajax wasn't born a combat prodigy. Rather, his strength was born in darkness, shaped by some things no one should ever have to face. And it's a story he's never told anyone. When he was 14, Ajax ran away from home. Life in a small, quiet village felt dull and suffocating at times. So one day, he grabbed a short sword, packed a small bag of bread, and set out into the snowy wilderness. But the wilderness of Snezhnaya is no place for a child. He got lost in the frozen forest, chased by wolves and bears, until he slipped, falling into a deep crack in the earth. This is where his story truly begins. Down there, in the endless dark, he came face to face with something beyond comprehension. The Abyss. It was a place that warped time and space, where normal rules simply didn't apply. It's said that in that moment, he encountered the all-devouring narwhal and somehow awakened it. The image of that creature, a massive cosmic whale, would later become a symbol in his fighting style, showing up in his attacks. That whale would haunt him for the rest of his life, and it has shaped his fate in ways he doesn't yet understand. In the Abyss, he met a mysterious swordswoman named Skirk. During those 3 months, she became his master, teaching him how to survive the abyss and how to turn his restless nature into pure destruction. Ajax, the child who once dreamed of adventure, found himself in a place that granted his wish in the worst possible way. He spent 3 long months in the abyss, but when he finally escaped and was found by his worried family, only 3 days had passed in the real world. When they found him, he was clutching his now rusted short sword, the same one he had left home with. But the boy who returned wasn't the same. That adventure marked the end of his childhood and the beginning of something else entirely. From that day on, Ajax, the boy from Moripusok, was gone. In his place stood a fighter molded by darkness and bloodlust. The Abyss had changed him. He was now confident, reckless, and obsessed with battle. Conflict became his comfort, and wherever he went, chaos seemed to follow. His father, once relieved to see his son alive, soon realized something was terribly wrong. Ajax started picking fights with everyone in the village. What used to be a quiet fishing town turned into a constant battleground. Eventually, one of those fights nearly turned deadly. Left with no choice, his father handed Ajax over to the Fatui, hoping discipline would calm him down. But instead, the soldiers found themselves beaten by a child. That raw power caught the attention of Pulcinella, the 5th of the Fatui Harbingers, who recruited Ajax into the Fatui under the guise of punishment. From there, his hunger for combat only grew, feeding on every victory until he rose to the ranks and earned a title feared across Teyvat: Child, Tartaglia, one of the 11 Fatui harbingers. But becoming Tartaglia was far from his end goal. To someone who sought to conquer the world, this was but a tiny step in his journey. Now you might be wondering, why does he have so many names? All the Fatui harbingers take their titles from Commedia dell'arte, an early form of Italian theater that spread across Europe between the 16th and 18th centuries. These plays used exaggerated, recognizable stock characters, each defined by a specific name, costume, and personality. Tartaglia is one of those classic characters. His name literally means the stutterer, and he's usually portrayed as a clumsy but endearing civil servant who's intelligent, yet constantly tripped up by his own speech impediment. He gets frustrated easily, but he's not evil. He represents the lower working class, someone trying to hold their own in the world despite chaos and miscommunication. The Tartaglia mask first appeared in Naples around 1610 and became especially popular by the late 17th century. So Tartaglia is Ajax's harbinger title, but he's also called Child. Child is actually an Old English title for a young nobleman who hasn't yet earned knighthood. In Genshin, Child is the codename Ajax goes by and the persona he presents to the world. It fits perfectly. He's the youngest and lowest ranked Fatui harbinger, still climbing towards something greater. The Tsaritsa may have chosen this title for him to reflect her belief in his untapped potential, that he's a warrior still in the process of earning his knighthood within her cause. But her cause is what exactly? A god with no love left for her people, and a nation that only follows her out of fear or hope that they'll survive her rebellion against Celestia. And standing in the middle of it all is her youngest harbinger. Before the mask, before the titles, his name was Ajax. To understand why that name is so important, we need to talk about the Battle Pass. Yeah, you heard that right. In version 4.0, Genshin released a new set of Battle Pass weapons, and one of them, Battle of the Fjords, quietly held one of the most important pieces of lore in the entire game. Because, of course, the sugar daddy character has the pay-to-win backstory. The story of the Ballad of the Fjords opens in the far north, a land of ice, fjords, and biting wind. The glaciers there are always moving, cracking apart and coming back together, like the land itself is alive. It's here that the legend of Ajax begins. Not the Fatui harbinger we've come to know and love, but the ancient hero he was named after, a name etched deep into Snezhnaya's history. The ballad tells us that Ajax discovered a hidden country of gold and white stone beneath the ice, an underwater kingdom that still glowed like dawn even after it fell. That golden city is believed to be Hyperborea, an ancient civilization near Snezhnaya, once home to the Frostmoon Scions and the Snowland Fae, before it was lost to the depths after a celestial nail struck the land. Some legends say Ajax sailed into the belly of a whale. Others say he fought a dragon across the frozen plains for 7 days and 7 nights. Deep within Hyperborea's ruins, he found the dragon's treasure, an endless sea of gold. But Ajax wasn't tempted. He knew gold was the root of calamity, so he took only what he needed to cure his sick friends. For all his heroism though, at heart he was just a boy. A boy who fished under frozen lakes, who fell into a lost kingdom, and who fell in love. Her name was Snegurochka, and like every great myth, their love ended in tragedy. They were torn apart by the wicked tricks of the changelings. The story fades out with a simple line, the end. But it doesn't really feel like one, does it? Because I believe the legend isn't finished, and Ajax's story is still being written somewhere else in the world. In real life, the name Ajax actually comes from Greek mythology. Ajax the Great was a powerful warrior in the Trojan War, second only to Achilles. He also had a brother named Teucer. But after losing a contest for Achilles' armor, he fell into madness and took his own life out of shame. Meanwhile, Ajax the Lesser was proud and arrogant. During the fall of Troy, he angered the gods by disrespecting Athena's temple. When he boasted that not even the gods could touch him, Poseidon struck his ship and drowned him. So let's talk about the kind of hero the legendary Ajax in Genshin was meant to be. His story is about change, restraint, and the courage to face what lies beneath the surface. His journey into the whale's belly and his fall into the sunken kingdom follow a familiar fictional pattern. A hero descends into the unknown, confronts the depths, and returns changed. But Ajax isn't a hero who wins through strength alone. When he finds the dragon's endless treasure hoard, he doesn't claim it. He takes only enough to save his friends, knowing that greed is a true cause of calamity and ruin. That choice defines him as a hero who resists temptation instead of giving into it. His love for Snegurotchka and losing her through the tricks of the changelings adds another layer to his story. In real-world mythology, a changeling is a supernatural being, often a fairy or spirit, left in place of a human child stolen by the Fae. The real child is taken to the fairy realm, while the changeling is an illusion or imitation meant to deceive the parents. Changelings represent themes of identity, deception, and substitution, beings that look real but aren't, blurring the line between truth and illusion. The love story of Ajax and Snegurotchka is a tale of separation and betrayal, where even love is tested by divine interference. While these experiences certainly shape him, the core of who Ajax is never shifts. Every battle, every loss, every act of restraint only brings him closer to his true self, someone who defies fate, challenges the divine, and holds onto what's real in a world built on illusion and control. Someone worthy of the title, the Third Descender, one who can transcend Teyvat's laws and change the fate of the world. But the name Ajax isn't where his story ends. In fact, it might not even be his only one. Because deep in the frozen myths of the far north, another name begins to surface: Saarelainen. A figure whose story mirrors Ajax's so closely, many believe they were one and the same. In the finale of Fontaine's Archon Quest, Skirk dropped one of the biggest lore bombs in Genshin's history. For the 3 years Genshin had been around, we'd never heard anything quite like this before. The 7 Archons of Teyvat each possess a Gnosis, a divine relic that connects them directly to Celestia, granting the power to govern their nations and serving as proof of their status as one of the 7. It's implied these Gnosis were given to the victors of the Archon War roughly 2,000 years ago, taking the form of ornate chess pieces. But in the Fontaine Archon Quest, Skirk revealed something no one expected. Thousands of years ago, the Gnosis were forged from the remains of the Third Descender. A Descender is a being who exists outside Teyvat's laws, and they aren't recorded in Irminsul. So far, we know of 4, the Heavenly Principles themselves as the first, and the Traveler is the 4th. When Rukkhitevata was erased from Irminsul, everyone forgot her. Everyone except the Traveler. Because as a Descender, they're beyond the system, so the laws of Teyvat don't apply to them. The term Descender usually refers to special outlanders, beings from outside Teyvat, basically aliens. But now we have reason to believe that even someone born in Teyvat can become one too. That brings us to the Hymns of the Far North, a book series that shocked the Genshin community. And that's an understatement. The kind of information it revealed felt like something that should have been saved for an Archon quest, but in true Genshin fashion, it was hidden in optional lore items instead. These books don't grant you any special powers, but they offer something better, a glimpse into the story long before the main quests actually reveals it. Volume 2 of the Hymns of the Far North introduces a man named Saarelainen, a cheerful, kind-hearted youth described as noble-born, gentle, and brave. He traveled across the forsaken Isle of Hisi Island and into the mist-shrouded lands of Pojola, where he sought to win the heart of Pakaisuko's daughter, a maiden of peerless beauty. Pakaisuko agreed to their marriage, but only if Saarelainen opened the gates of Pojola for him. Despite knowing that he would be punished severely by Pitkamunen for doing so, Saarelainen willingly opened the gates so that Pakaisuko would not send his daughter to do it instead. After Saarelainen entered Pojola, he was punished by Pitkamunen, who carved him into 7 pieces. The young and pure daughter of Pakaisuko would never again be wed. You might be thinking, okay, but how is this life-changing lore? I don't even recognize any of these names. And fair enough, but you're not getting baited, I promise. Because here's the thing, in Teyvat, fairy tales aren't just stories. They're how people protect the truth. When history risks being erased from Irminsul or tampered with, Teyvatians learn to hide real events behind allegory and fairy tales. So, if we read the hymns of the far north through that lens, not as fiction, but as a coded record, an entirely different story starts to reveal itself. Ajax and Saarelainen share so many parallels that it's highly likely they are the same person. Ajax took only enough gold from the dragon he slew to heal his sick friends, while Saarelainen was called upon by the Frostmoon Scions to heal wounds and cure disease. Ajax's lover was Snegurochka, which means snow maiden in Russian. In real-life folklore, she's often depicted as a girl made of snow who comes to life, sometimes the daughter of spring and winter, or a snow spirit. In most versions, she can't love until her heart awakens, and when she finally does, she melts away, undone by the warmth of human affection. Saarelainen's unnamed lover mirrors Snegurochka's story. She's the daughter of Pakaisuko, whose name comes from the Finnish Pakasukko, meaning Father Frost, the same figure known in Slavic tales as Snegurochka's grandfather. In Genshin's context, Pakaisuko could represent the Beletsar, the first Cryo-Archon and ruler of the Fae. His successor, the Tsaritsa, inherited his divine throne, making it possible that the first Cryo-Archon was her father. In that case, Snegurochka, the snow maiden of legend, would be none other than the Tsaritsa herself. Now there's one last piece to decode, Pohjola. In Finnish mythology and the Kalevala epic, Pohjola is a legendary land in the far north. Depending on the story, it's described as a frozen kingdom full of danger and magic, or even as a realm that borders the underworld. In other words, Pohjola can be wilderness, enemy territory, or the boundary between life and death itself. The land is ruled by Louhi, a powerful witch and queen who opposes the heroes. She's known for setting impossible challenges, especially when they try to win her daughter's hands or claim the Sampo, a mysterious object said to bring fortune and balance to the world. In Finnish myth, the Sampo is a divine mill that endlessly produces grain, salt, and gold. In Genshin, that same concept appears as a Sampo mill, an ancient Hyperborean relic built to harness and reshape energy, once a machine of creation, now a lost legend tied to the Frostmoon Scions. Louhi herself is associated with cold, disease, and death, sometimes called the mother of wolves and ailments. Her cunning and power make her a constant antagonist in the Kalevala. Side note, her story feels eerily similar to the Night Mother from The Pale Princess and the Six Pygmies. In Genshin, Pohjola is where Saarelainen was killed and dismembered, his body turned into the Seven Gnosis. In myth, Pohjola is the border between life and death, suggesting that in Genshin, it may also be the boundary between Teyvat and the Abyss, or Teyvat and outer space. At some point in time, the Beletsar had intentions to overthrow the divine order imposed by Celestia, a plan that may have been in motion far longer than anyone realized. Before the Cataclysm 500 years ago, he was influenced by the Conrayan monk Hrothvangi, who shared his desire to defy the heavenly principles. Opening the gates that separate the Abyss or outer space from Teyvat would have definitely drawn the heavenly principles' attention, the being known to the Frostmoon Scions as Pitkamunen. So, how should we interpret the lore revealed in the Hymns of the Far North now? Volume 2 of the Hymns of the Far North introduces a man named Saarelainen, also known as Ajax, a cheerful, kind-hearted youth described as noble-born, gentle, and brave. He traveled across the forsaken Isle of Hisi Island and into the mist-shrouded lands of Pohjola, where he sought to win the heart of the Beletsar's daughter, a maiden of peerless beauty, the Tsaritsa. The Beletsar agreed to their marriage, but only if Ajax opened the gates of Pohjola, the border between Teyvat and the Abyss, for him. Despite knowing that he would be punished severely by the heavenly principles for doing so, Ajax willingly opened the gates so that the Beletsar would not send his own daughter to do it instead. After Ajax entered Pohjola, the heavenly principles punished him, carving him into 7 pieces and transforming his body into the Gnosis of the 7 Archons. The young and pure daughter of the Beletsar, the Tsaritsa, would never again be wed. But here's where things start to get worrying, because if this story is more than just a fairy tale, then it means Child, our Ajax, might be running straight into a trap. In Teyvat, names are powerful. They can bind a person to a fate that's already been written, predestined. So before we can grasp what this story means for our Child, we first need to understand how fate actually works in Teyvat. Now, this next part comes from what we currently know in Genshin's lore, but with a bit of theorizing. The exact mechanics of fate in Teyvat aren't clearly explained in-game, but this is the simplest and most logical way to make sense of how it all seems to work. Every person's fate in Teyvat is decided by a single system, which we'll call the Fate System, and it requires 3 components: Irminsul data, a constellation, and a name. The Irminsul is the world's database. Everything that's ever happened, every person who's ever lived, every event that's ever occurred is stored inside it. The ley lines act as Irminsul's veins, carrying those memories through the land like data through a network. What flows through the ley lines eventually returns to Irminsul, which stores it as the official truth of history. But that truth can be edited, as we saw when Nahida erased Rukkhadevata and the world itself forgot she ever existed. But Irminsul doesn't just record information, it also projects it. The proof of its work is right above us, the constellations that fill Teyvat's sky. Way back in version 1.1, Scaramouche warned us that the sky is a lie. And years later, he was very correct. Oh, Scaramouche, gone but never forgotten, and his words will continue to haunt us. The stars above Teyvat aren't real stars at all. They're projections of data, fate records from the Irminsul written into the sky. We actually saw proof of this in the Unreconciled Stars event when meteorites fell over Mondstadt. Mona discovered that those meteorites came from someone's constellation, carrying the will and the ambition of a man named Leonard. And they weren't ordinary rocks. They looked identical to the fruits of the Irminsul tree, crystalline nodes that store the world's memories. This means the stars we see in the night sky are really Irminsul fruits, projected upward as constellations. Each one holds the data of a person's life, their past, their present, and future, written into Teyvat's fate system. Every being born in Teyvat is assigned what we call a fate record. When a person dies, that record isn't erased. It flows back into the ley lines, waiting to be recycled. The false sky is just the visible interface of the system where each person's record appears as their constellation. So when Mona reads someone's stars, she's literally reading the data of their fate in this world. The final key to the system is a name. In Teyvat, a name is the link that binds your soul to your fate record. Think of it like an access key to your constellation. When you live, act, or die, your name updates your story within Irminsul. But if a name is reused, like when Anders' daughter named her creation Durin after the dragon in Dragonspine, the system connects that new being to an old record instead of creating a new one, forcing them to inherit the same fate. Irminsul decides what happens. The constellation shows what's been written. The name decides who it happens to. Together, they form the system that governs Teyvat, every story bound by data, and every soul chained to the stars. So, what kind of fate has Child been bound to? His real name is Ajax, the same as the hero from the Ballad of the Fjords and the man known as Satalainen in the hymns of the far north. They share far too many parallels to ignore. In the old legends, Ajax sails into the belly of a whale and falls into a lost golden kingdom beneath the sea. Satalainen descends into Pohjola, the frozen land that borders life and death, where he's punished by the heavenly principles and carved into 7 pieces to form the 7 Gnosis. In Child, the modern Ajax falls into the abyss, trains under Skirk, and returns to Teyvat with powers that don't belong to this world. Even their imagery connects. Ajax's wailing dragon, Satalainen's ascent into the depths, and Child's constellation, the celestial narwhal, all symbolize the same thing. A dive into the unknown, a test of strength and will against the depths itself. Fittingly, both Ajax, Satalainen, and Child are marked by the number 3, Satalainen as the 3rd descender and Child as the 3rd son in his family. By carrying the name of the hero who defied Celestia and was punished for it, then we already know what kind of fate might be waiting for our Ajax. Everything about him points toward a fate that ends in sacrifice. If only there were a way for him to escape that fate that's already written in the stars, to break free from Celestia's script entirely. And maybe, just maybe, the only way out is to stop being a part of the system at all, to do the impossible, to become a descender. In Genshin Impact, the term descender doesn't necessarily have to describe a race or being. It technically describes a relationship to the world itself. Nahida explains that descenders are beings whose existence is not recorded in Irminsul, meaning they live beyond the system that governs Teyvat's laws and memories. So being a descender doesn't exclusively mean you come from space. It means you exist outside the world's database, immune to the edits and rules that bind everyone else. So, what if a human could become one? So far, all available records about Ajax Satalainen indicate that he was a human born within Teyvat, not an alien. Nothing in the Hymns of the Far North or the related Frostmoon Scion texts suggests he came from beyond the false sky. Every account portrays him as a human hero, noble-born and kind-hearted, and we can infer that he transcended his mortal limits through extraordinary circumstances. In fact, certain characters in the lore believed it might be possible for a human to become a descender. One of them is René de Petrichor of Fontaine. After learning about the descenders, he became obsessed with the idea of reaching that same state himself, believing that if a human could ascend beyond Irminsul's control, they might become powerful enough to save others from fate. His belief alone shows that the world of Teyvat acknowledges this possibility, that descension isn't limited to beings born beyond the stars, but might be achievable through transcendence, a process I like to call ascending by descending. This is one of the ways I think someone could actually ascend to become a descender, at least in theory. I'll explain. If there's one place in all of Teyvat that seems to defy logic itself, it's the Spiral Abyss. Every legend that mentions it describes it differently. Some call it a dungeon, some call it a ruin, and others a gateway. But one thing is certain, the Spiral Abyss doesn't follow the rules of the world above. It's said to have been built by an ancient civilization long before the Archons or Celestia ever rose to power. A massive, inverted city buried beneath the ocean floor, now split into two parts, the Abyss Corridor, which connects worlds, and the Abyssal Moonspire, which leads to the unknown. Inverted City. Keep that in mind. It's a place where even the laws of direction seem to break. Because when you climb the Spiral Abyss, you're not actually going up. You're going down. The benediction of the Abyss reads, "The everlasting whisper of the Spiral Abyss encourages you to go deeper." But here's the strange part. The deeper you go, the more you climb upward. Each chamber of the Spiral Abyss takes you higher, closer to the sky, even though lore says you're descending into the depths. How can that be? Well, the world itself might be upside down. Relative to Teyvat, every step upward inside the Spiral Abyss could actually be a descent, deeper into its spiral and closer to the true abyss or outer space below. It's a paradox that's been hiding in plain sight since the game's earliest days. The lore describes adventurers who enter seeking treasures and secrets long forgotten, but what they actually find isn't just treasure, it's transcendence. The Spiral Abyss is, in a way, a bridge between planes of existence. The Abyss Corridor connects worlds while the Moonspire leads to the unknown. That language seems to describe a gate, a structure designed to pass through the layers of reality that separate Teyvat from what's beyond its borders. And that spiral shape, the Abyssal Moonspire, is a symbol of recursion, a looping motion, an endless cycle of ascending and descending. And in Teyvat, who knows? Everything might be in a loop. The Leylines recycle memories and history repeats itself. When the lore says the Abyssal Moonspire leads to the unknown, it might mean that literally. The unknown could refer to the space outside Irminsul's and Celestia's control, the domain of the Descenders. If that's the case, the Spiral Abyss could be the gateway between Teyvat's recorded world and the unrecorded beyond, the same boundary that Ajax and the Traveler have both brushed against. To descend through it might not be a fall into darkness at all, but a journey toward freedom. So one way to become a descender might be through the Abyss, which is why so many beings were obsessed with using it against Celestia. Another possible way for a human to become a descender might involve the Irminsul itself. Everything that exists in Teyvat, every life, memory, and event, is stored inside it like a global database. When Nahida erased Rukkhadevata, the world forgot she ever existed, proving that reality itself adjusts when a record is removed. And when Scaramouche deleted himself from Irminsul, everyone who knew him forgot him, even though his actions still echoed through history. This technically means a person can exist without a record, and if that state becomes permanent, then maybe there's a way they can step outside Teyvat's system. This process begins with disconnection. A person must sever their identity from the Irminsul database. If a human could erase themselves completely, their story would vanish from history, leaving them as a blank entity that the Irminsul can't track or control. They would no longer be a recorded life, but an external variable, something the world can't edit or predict. Wait, this is starting to sound familiar, right? If Scaramouche had his identity erased from Irminsul, wouldn't that make him a descender too? Well, not exactly. This is just my theory, but here's how I think it actually works. Wander's deletion was a manual edit within the system, a rewrite of data, not an escape or ascension from it. Not to mention, Nahida, who suspected that Scaramouche would erase himself, had already created a backup of his memories, disguised as a fairy tale story. Although the world forgot Scaramouche, his body, his soul, and his consciousness still exist inside Teyvat's framework. Therefore, he's still bound to the same laws of Teyvat. Ajax Sadealainen, on the other hand, could have undergone something entirely different, something that forcibly removed him from Irminsul's jurisdiction altogether. His transformation into the third descender wasn't a simple data edit like Scaramouche's. It was more like a system crash. I'm guessing when he opened the gates of Pojola, he crossed a threshold that erased his entry in Irminsul's memory, not by deletion, but by transcendence. A step further than what happened to Scaramouche. So the logic is this. Wanderer Scaramouche was still within Teyvat's system, just missing his file. Ajax Sadealainen became something completely external to the system, an unrecordable being, a true descender. When Nahida rewrote Irminsul, Rukkhadevata's record was deleted, but her essence still existed within Teyvat's system. Her erasure was also an internal system edit, not a transcendence. Rukkhadevata and Scaramouche were erased from within the system. Ajax Sadealainen was cast out beyond the system. To truly become a descender, a person would have to leave Teyvat's system completely, to exist in a way that Irminsul can't find, record, or rewrite them. In short, erasing yourself is only the first step. Real descension means going beyond the system entirely, and perhaps that involves a very arduous, very specific journey. Perhaps this is something only humans are capable of. After all, Dainsleif once said, "We humans have our humanity. We will defy this world with a power from beyond." That power from beyond is probably something that exists outside Teyvat's system entirely, beyond Irminsul, beyond the false sky. The power of a descender. Sorry, Wanderer. You know what though? If he wants to become a descender one day, I'll support him, as long as Dainsleif gets to also. If any human could ever become a descender in Genshin, it would be the one already destined for it. The tragedy of Ajax Sadealainen, the third descender, casts a long shadow over everything we know about the Gnosis. According to Neuvillette vision story, the Heavenly Principles killed Sadealainen, and in collaboration with one who came after, presumably the second descender, used his corpse to forge the seven Gnosis. It was an act of containment. The Heavenly Principles, the creator of Teyvat's order, would have every reason to be afraid of another descender. A being capable of defying the will of the world is an existential threat to a system built entirely on control. The Gnosis formed from his body exists to continue subduing and controlling the resentments of the world. Skirk's words to Neuvillette reveal the haunting consequence of this act. She recognizes the Gnosis not as gifts of the gods, but as objects tainted with a curse. This curse reflects the same phenomenon seen when gods die. Orobashi's corpse poisoned Watatsumi, and Havria's death turned her people into salt. When gods perish, their will lingers, sometimes warped into something vengeful. If the Gnosis were made from Ajax Sadealainen's body, then each one carries part of his lingering pain, his resentment, his grief, his lost love. Ajax loved the Tsaritsa, so much so that he sacrificed his life for hers. The Tsaritsa's plan has always looked like a rebellion against Celestia, but now it's starting to look like something far greater. Her mission to gather all 7 Gnosis might not just be about overthrowing the gods of Celestia, but resurrecting a being who surpasses them. Skirk's words in Fontaine changed everything. The Gnosis, heart of a god, were crafted from the remains of the 3rd Descender. That means the Tsaritsa is gathering the pieces of a Descender. She would be reassembling the corpse of the 3rd Descender, her lover, her Ajax. And that brings us to Childe, our Ajax. In Teyvat, names act like keys or references, linking souls to existing fate records in the Irminsul. By carrying the same name as the 3rd Descender, Childe has unknowingly tied himself to that same record, to that same doomed story. So if the Tsaritsa truly succeeds in restoring all 7 hearts of a god, she may need a vessel to contain the spirit of the one they once belonged to. And who better than the man who already bears his name? She might be keeping Childe close for a reason. He could very well be the vessel meant to house the revived 3rd Descender. But don't celebrate just yet. Childe's destiny is historically doomed to end in sacrifice and tragedy. If 2 Ajaxes can't exist at once, if the record of the 3rd Descender can only inhabit one form, then Childe may have to die for the 3rd Descender to return. To the Tsaritsa, that might not be a sacrifice at all, but a reunion. After all, to revive the being she once loved, she might be willing to destroy the man who's just a shadow of him. Personally, I don't want that to happen since I like our Ajax, and I'm sure many of you do and want to keep him alive. But all of this also reframes the Tsaritsa's ambitions. If gathering the 7 Gnosis restores the body of the 3rd Descender, then she could potentially discover how he became one. By recreating that process, the Tsaritsa could unlock a way for mortals to ascend beyond Celestia's control, breaking free from the world's fate system entirely. It would be liberation, granting humanity the same freedom once held by the man who defied the heavenly principles itself. I'm wondering if the Tsaritsa sees a piece of that same spark within Childe, the courage, the defiance, the will to fight even when the odds are impossible. But there's one final theory I want to talk about, one that ties everything back to the idea of fate records. What if the first Ajax and Satalainen weren't the same person at all, but rather bearers of the same record within Irminsul's system? Each one in their own time lived out the same story, bound by the same constellation, the same fate written in the stars. The original Ajax could have been the first to bear that record, Satalainen the second, and now our Ajax, Childe, is the third. Every version inherits fragments of the last, the courage, the tragedy, the pull toward the abyss, and the defiance against the divine. But unlike those who came before him, Childe still stands at the crossroads of that destiny. The story may be written, but he still has the power to change how it ends. He might be the one to finally break the cycle, to prove that even in a world ruled by gods and stars, a human can choose their own fate. He calls himself kind of a bad guy, someone who lives for the thrill of a fight and the chaos that follows. But maybe that spark in him isn't a curse after all. Even if his name truly ties him to suffering and sacrifice, maybe this time it's different. Maybe this time his story won't end in tragedy. Maybe the story of Ajax will be the one about a man who finally broke free from the fate written in the stars and lived to tell the tale.